Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Pareshat Kedoshim, where we're going to try to do our best to appreciate a parsha that throws at us a lot. In other words, this is not a parsha that has one specific theme or two themes that we have to work with, but rather it presents to us a whole slew of different practices that they are all important, they're all fundamental. So we're going to try to appreciate a little bit of the idea of this parsha. Now, we need to understand that this is considered a fundamental section because Moshe Rabbeinu addresses Kol Adat Bnei Israel. You don't find this, that Moshe Rabbeinu is told to address the whole assembly. So what's so significant here? So commentators note that if you look at the parsha carefully, you are going to find all of the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 sayings, referred to. So keep your eyes open, and as you hear the parsha or read the parsha, you'll find Aseret HaDibrot. So it appears that the nation is really being presented here with an unpacking of the Aseret HaDibrot. The 10 sayings have a lot of details. Here we are learning to apply them, and that's why it's a very important parsha. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, tell the whole assembly that you need to be kedoshim. Now, what does it mean to be holy? To be kadosh, what does that mean? So sometimes we perhaps encounter commentators that tell us that it means that we need to be elevated. And you say kadosh, kadosh, kadosh Hashem. You try to elevate yourself because you have an understanding that we worship this elevated being. You be elevated as well. Perhaps, but perhaps we could work with a little bit of a better assessment of that word. And it means that we need to be designated. We have to understand that we have to designate our life for something special. Recognize that our existence is special and do something special with it. Designate life for something special. That's going to be the theme that we're going to try to go ahead and address. Now, why do people at times live lives that are not appreciated, live lives that really accomplish nothing? So clearly, if a person believes that we are just a mistake, right, a coincidence, existence is random. Once upon a time, some cells split and eventually they turned into monkeys and we became sophisticated monkeys because after all, we share 99% of our DNA with a chimpanzee. So if that's the approach you take, well, if you're a mistake and your existence is a mistake, how can there be significance, right? How can you have an elevated or a designated life for something special if you are just a monkey and a little bit better? And by the way, when you watch these magnificent documentaries on YouTube or on Netflix about nature, which, by the way, they are very inspiring when you see the sophistication of the animal kingdom or of the different species that exist in the Amazons. It's inspiring. It's inspiring for those of us who understand that, Marabu Masech Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you created this incredible world. But there are those that study nature and study the animal kingdom and basically have an agenda to prove that, dolphins also communicate and they have emotions and chimpanzees have emotions. And they're trying to close that gap between humans and animals. That's not the Torah approach. Our approach is an understanding. We are here to do something very special. We have a designated life for something that is indeed kadosh. And one thing that indicates that we have an understanding that something significant occurred 3,400 years ago that gave us clarity about our existence and our identity is the way we treat parents and grandparents and the past. In other words, you find, for example, if let's say you want to purchase a puppy, right? Purchase a puppy. So I remember hearing once, I'm not in the market for puppies, no interest, but I heard something fascinating. It's probably true that a puppy could already manage without the mother after 8 weeks. 8 weeks. And you could be dealing with teenagers, and today kids are teenagers into their 30s. They still need their parents. Like, it's very interesting. 8 weeks vis-a-vis 3 decades. How do we understand that? Well, one would say, humans have more needs, have more emotional needs. They have to also figure out how to manage the world and how to earn a living. So they need longer than the 8 weeks of the puppy. But just as you don't find a 1-year-old dog walking around still looking for the mother because they figured out life, they don't need the parent anymore. Logically, when a person is at a state that they figure things out on their own, the relationship with the parent should end. But there's an understanding that, I have to have a relationship with my parent because there's an akara satov. They brought me to this world. They brought me here. And there's more than that. When I have an appreciation for the fact that they handed me clarity as to why I am here and what I am supposed to achieve, they are an extremely significant part of my elevated and designated experience. So as long as my parent does not tell me to violate in any way, shape, or form the teachings of Torah, I have to respect them. Why? Because my existence is important. If existence is just random, right, and my parents are basically a generation closer to the prehistoric human, right, and to a chimpanzee, there's no need to respect. They provided me with what I need. I'm now progressing. After all, we have to progress from the ancient thinking of the past. What significance do parents have? But when I have an understanding that, the moment that defined us humans is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed the neshama and created an Adam Arishon. And the significant moment occurred 3,400 years ago at Sinai. And my parents and my teachers are a link to that past. So I have an appreciation for the designated, for the chaim that have kedusha. I have to respect them. And it's interesting that the Torah wants us to start off in the understanding of the significance of life, and you are here to achieve things with that statement. Ish imo ve'aviv tirau. Okay? Have reverence to the parents. As long as they serve as a link. Ve'et shaptotai tishmaru. In other words, as the rabbis tell us, you have the obligation to honor the parents as long as they don't tell you to violate the Shabbat. If a parent, for whatever reason, unfortunately, does not value these traditions, they're not a link to that past. So in such a case, you don't listen to them. And this teaching, Rav Hirsch tells us that this idea of telling us, honor parents, but remember the Shabbat is not just the Shabbat. Parents have significance, and we owe everything to our parents because they gave us an understanding what we are here to do, what our designated and elevated life is all about. So that's the beginning of the journey of being Kadosh, the beginning of the journey. Now, humans have ups and downs. It's a reality. It's a reality that we've accepted. We accept the ups and downs of ourselves. We should accept the ups and downs of others. And when we are down, we remember that God willing, we are going to get that assistance from above to lift us again. But sometimes when we slip spiritually and we start feeling this internal emptiness, we sometimes turn to things that are hollow, that are empty. You need some form of relaxation. We need to relax. So there's obviously a relaxation that's acceptable or even encouraged in our tradition. When a person wants to re-energize their spiritual batteries and they take off a few days and they go to a vacation and they see, the handwork of our Creator and they are inspired by it, that's wonderful. But sometimes the downs have us turning to things that are completely empty, which we think that, perhaps they'll give us a little bit of a relaxation. It's interesting how you could turn on the news nowadays, and there's this tragic war taking place in Ukraine. And like everything else, since it's already been around for several weeks, it's not news as much as it was 2 months ago. On the other hand, when there are two Hollywood celebrities that are Nebach fighting out in courts, that's headline. That's headlines, and people could sit and watch how these two celebrities are fighting in court. And what's fascinating is that when we think about it, if we would stop and think, we would realize it is so empty. Nebach, a couple is fighting, nothing we should be happy about. But why am I interested in it? Like, what's wrong with me? So sometimes the emptiness that we have elevates things that have really nothing to offer. When we lived in Buffalo, and everyone was into the Buffalo Bills. And when they would have a bad game on a Sunday, on Monday, it was really tangible wherever you go that people were in a bad mood because of the Buffalo Bills. It was tangible. So for me, there was a benefit. I was busy in the kashrus industry, and I would have to visit plants, and I had to have conversations with people that come from very, very different backgrounds. So at least I was able to talk a little bit about the Buffalo Bills. It was magnificent for conversation. But to see even in a shul, people in a bad mood, it was odd. So there's one fellow, a smart fellow, Dr. Danziger would say, listen, when I have a bad day at work, I don't see the Buffalo Bills sad. Why should I be sad when they have a bad day at work? In other words, like he understood that there, when it comes to sports in North America, or the Maple Leafs, hockey here in Canada, there's nothing wrong if you want your local population to be happy, as long as you don't make something so hollow into significant. Put it in proportion. If it really destroys the mood, we have a problem here. And the human condition is such as you have to realize, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, as ones who are designated and elevated, and you are here to achieve great things, be careful when you come into a situation that you have this urge to be poneh, to turn, to find something else to give you that boost, which we do at times, right? It could be a social gathering. It could be some music. It could be nature. We have this need for some kind of boost. be sure not to boost yourself with something that is completely hollow. And that's what we find in the next verse in chapter 19, verse 4. Al tifnu, don't turn. A person who is poneh is something that you are turning, meaning we have a very clear path in life. Judaism has given us the gift of clarity and direction. We wake up in the morning, we know what we are supposed to do. And it's an incredible gift because we could look forward and say, you know what, today I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to daven. And then I'm going to go to work and I'm going to be honest and do the best job I could do at work today. And then I'm going to go ahead and interact with others in a pleasant way. You know, we have this direction that's given to us. Sometimes we have to be poneh. We turn to something else. Perhaps we're a little bit overwhelmed or for whatever reason. Be sure not to be poneh el ha'elilim. And there is a fascinating midrash that tells us that elilim relates to the word something that is chalul. Elil chalul. Chalul is something that's hollow. Don't turn to things that are completely hollow and make them significant. When entertainment becomes something of an obsession, right? Or when you go ahead and take issues of complete insignificance and make them into your whole life as an agenda, as a goal, you are making something that is hollow real. Don't do that. And you know what that leads us to? When a person gets sucked into a mindset that there's value in emptiness, right? When the entertainment and the gossip and the interest of the world becomes something that you really start following and it sucks you in, you suddenly feel this insecurity of life, right? Because you know that you're not on that path that you should be, and you are seeking something that as if to protect you. In other words, once we start going down that dangerous path of turning to emptiness for meaning, we suddenly have to create another external way of protecting ourselves. In other words, when I'm a person of faith, and I believe that when I do the right thing, and there's a challenge, there's a creator that will assist me, and I'm going to get what I need and not get what I don't need, I have the tools to deal with the challenges of life. But when I'm poneh, when I turn away from him, and then there are challenges, and then there are worries, I have no longer the ability to turn to Hashem. So I start building something, perhaps start developing friendships with problematic people or investments that are not good, because I lose direction and I'm seeking protection from something false and fake. And that's what we are told to in the second half of the verse. Elohei Masecha. Rav Hirsch says that Masecha is something like external, like a mask, something that's external, an external protection. The real way of protecting ourselves is by doing the right thing day in, day out, and having faith with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's how we live. But at times, when we slip from that path, we start seeking external things to protect ourselves, right? And for some, it is working way beyond what they should be working, or in fields perhaps they shouldn't be working, or investments that are irrational. They are seeking the masecha, says Rav Hirsch. That's what you avoid in verse 4. Now, one of the most important aspects of the Jewish journey is clearly self-value. Self-value. And I personally always feel that one of the first things taught to a child is that, children are taught at a very young age that if a siddur, a chumash, a tehillim falls on the floor, you pick it up and you kiss it. That's what we are taught. Some people have a tradition of picking it up and reading from it, showing some reverence to the text. So I always feel that the first time a child is taught this idea, we should tell him as well that, although this siddur is very holy. And when it fell to the ground, we want to show some respect to it by kissing it or using it. You know what's far more significant than a sitter? A human being, a person, you. And you explain to the child that, in courses of ethics, if you ever take a course on ethics, one of the questions that often start off the journey of such a course is what's known as the trolley problem. What's the trolley problem? That you are in a trolley, it's going down a track, and you see in front of you 5 people tied to the track, and you have no way of diverting the train or stopping it from killing the 5 people. However, you just realize that to the right, there's another track. And if you move the lever, it will go on the side track, but the problem is that it's going to kill one worker on the side track. And the great moral dilemma that's dealt with in every ethics course is, what do you do in such a case? Do you just stay on your track and do nothing? And as a result, 5 people are unfortunately going to lose their life. Or do you actively move the trolley to another track where you save 5 people, but you actively killed 1? So this is the great moral dilemma of the trolley problem. So you could adjust this moral dilemma and ask the child, what if you would have a situation that you have a trolley and it's going to kill a person, any human being, and you can move it to a sidetrack, but on the sidetrack, you're going to be destroying 100 holy books, Gemaras, Chumashim, Sefer Torah. So the reality is that one human being is more important. And child, you've just learned that if a sefer, if a tehillim, if a siddur falls on the floor, it got to be treated with respect. The same applies to a human. And it's something you have to feel about yourself. You have significance. You're a human being. Yiddishkeit and all those beautiful things that we talk about that are of value are only of value when there is a Jew practicing it. And Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem, every human being has value. These things are so fundamental, and we need to remind ourselves, because people achieve things when they realize their significance. When a person has no self-value, they could harm themselves and harm others. I would tell my kids when we would drive on the road that if you see a car that's all scratched up and banged up and damaged, you have to be careful driving next to it, because a regular driver is going to be careful as they drive because they don't want to hurt their own car or damage or scratch their own car. But if you are anyway driving a piece of junk where you're not concerned about another dent or another scratch or another taillight that's going to be busted, you're a dangerous driver because you don't have self-value. And we as humans have to have this feeling, I am important. I am of significance. It's fundamental. Now, one of the ways we could train ourselves, or we've had in the past the opportunity to train ourselves of our importance, was achieved in the Bet HaMikdash. How was it achieved? So it works as follows. The Bet HaMikdash and the Korbanot were so fundamental to our ancestors as something of value that there was no question, because it was a religious that was Bet HaMikdash centered, temple centered religion. So like we've learned in the past that 2,000 years ago, you could turn to a child of age 3, 4, or 5, and they would be extremely familiar with the laws and rules that relate to Tumah and Tahara, purity and impurity. So if in Talmudic literature you find a whole discussion about a vessel that came in contact with a rodent. If it is tameh or tahor, pure or impure, for us it is difficult to go ahead and comprehend it fully because it's not practical. But in the days of the Bet HaMikdash, that the goal of the average Jew was to have access when he wanted to come to Jerusalem, access to the temple, to the areas permitted. They were knowledgeable in these laws of purity or impurity because without being in a state of purity, they couldn't come up. It was extremely important, korbanot. Obviously, that's why the achievement of Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, that after the destruction of the temple, he was able to go ahead and re-educate the Jewish people that we still have a faith without the temple, was a tremendous achievement, no question. Now, korbanot, interview any Jew 2,500 years ago. Korbanot are of significance. Now, what was also significant for the people of Israel were the Kohanim, the priests. It is natural for us humans to want to find another human being that we could somehow value or even worship. We have that tendency. That tendency could become very tragic when you have these religious leaders who enjoy the power and they become cult leaders. And it's occurring within, not just within other cultures or faiths, even within Judaism, right? When you hear these nutty stories of people walking around, they could get rid of your ayin hara, or they could give you a blessing. You have to be very careful, very suspicious. In other words, a reputation or an article or some flyer that a great rabbi is coming and he could give you a blessing and you'll be okay. Be careful, be careful. Just as you do research before you go to a doctor, do research before you go to these quote unquote rabbis. They could be nutty people at best, right? They could be very dangerous people. You have to be careful. And the result sometimes comes about due to the fact that people worship them. You have someone very charismatic and he can give these incredible lectures, and then he starts giving you blessings, and he starts believing in himself, and then he starts appreciating his power, and then he can control your life, and then he allows his own personal desires to take control. You have some really problematic people within our faith. So now this desire to connect to someone could be used for the good as well, because Klal Yisrael is blessed with great rabbinic leadership as well. We have Torah personalities that were really concerned for the welfare of Klal Yisrael. And they understood that they have power, right? And the vast majority of rabbis are doing a very good job in realizing that, yeah, in some communities, they are, there's a lot of respect for them and they use it for the good. So the concept of looking at a person and saying, that is a holy person always existed. And 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, it was basically the Kohanim. The Kohanim, Klal Yisrael valued their Kohanim. They protected them. And if a city was under attack, you protect your Kohen. They took care of their needs because they understood that if you take care of the Kohen, you are taking care of yourself. When a Kohen would eat something, when I would watch a Kohen eating a portion of a korban that was given, I would see in it something holy, because here is the Kohen, a man that focuses on spirituality, eating something and sustaining himself. And as a result, he could continue doing his avodat HaKodesh, his holy work. You see a Kohen doing something, there's value there. Now that you understand that sections of a sacrifice burnt on an altar are of significance, now that you understand that what a Kohen eats is of significance, if we have a goal to educate the average Jew that what you do is also important, you know what we have in our tradition that achieves that? There's a korban called a shlamim. shlamim. It's a korban that is a complete package, a complete deal, because there's a section that's burnt on the altar. There's a section that's given to the Kohen. And there's a section that you, simple Jew, me, the simple Jew, I'm going to eat from it, and I'm going to be achieving something spiritual that is of equal value to a section being burnt on the altar and a section being consumed by the Kohen. And by doing that, you know what I walk away with in understanding that I have value. What I do day in, day out has value. And yes, I'm involved in the marketplace and I interact with people. And I might be sitting hours upon hours during the day in a workplace that has nothing to do on the surface with spirituality. But if I do it for the right reason, and I do it in an honest way, and I do it with a commitment to sanctify the name of God, I am doing my part, and that too is holy. The shlamim is holy. Now, it's not natural for a person to understand that what you eat, what you drink, what you do is of great value, great significance, and you are fulfilling that elevated and designated life by doing so. It's not easy for people to remember. So sometimes a person would bring a shlamim, and after seeing a section of it being burnt on the altar and a section of it being consumed by the Kohen, when it comes to his own section, he doesn't value it enough, right? And since he doesn't value it, he'll treat it like any other piece of meat. And his attitude would most probably be, come on, I'm not achieving anything by eating it. It's just another piece of salami. It's a piece of meat. I'll put it in the refrigerator. I'll eat it like I eat anything else. How can it have significance if me, the simple Jew, is the one that's supposed to consume it? The Torah warns you that's not the appropriate attitude. And that's what appears in chapter 19, verse 5, 6, 7. That when you bring a peace offering, the shlamim, do it in a way that will find favor. Understand that what you do has significance. And therefore, eat it at the designated time. Don't leave over meat. Treat it as something holy. Treat it as a significant act that is no less than what the Kohen or the Mizbeach is doing. Because if you don't, it's a great sin. Because you have Kodesh Hashem, you have the opportunity to do something that is holy. You are doing something holy. Now, this is a section that wants us to understand what we do is of significance. Now, obviously, the average Jew makes his way to the marketplace, is involved in commerce, and naturally, it is far more challenging to think and feel I am involved in something of great value, I am involved in holiness, when all he is doing is interacting with currencies or with cloth or with goods. Now, that attitude comes from, again, problematic education. In other words, when a person goes to an institution that only preaches the value of the study of Torah, which God forbid, we can't minimize its significance. But if that's the only aspect of the Jewish life that is focused on, the result will be that when a person has to leave the Bet HaMidrash, they're going to feel an emptiness, and they will not feel that their acts are spiritual. If, on the other hand, they get the proper education, then obviously there is nothing more valuable than the study of Torah. But for those who are designated to make their way to the workplace, they are achieving incredible things and fulfilling a mitzvah. And it's not just a mitzvah that by working they could have time afterwards to learn, but working in an honest, committed way is a mitzvah. If that would be the education, suddenly that great challenge of the marketplace would be diminished. There is an incredible statement or several statements that appear in Avot de Rab Natan. Avot de Rab Natan. Avot de Rab Natan is a text that it is like an expanded version of Pirkei Avot. And there's a section there that talks about the importance of work. So number one, this section tells us that a person should never retire. In other words, this Avot de Rab Natan says there is such value in work that retiring is not good. And when people retire, Avot de Rab Natan is basically telling us, and you feel this void in existence, you're in a dangerous state. It's unhealthy. And I'll quote to you. The Avot Rabbanan the Rab Natan tells us, Kol mi she'eino osek b'melacha. Anyone that's not involved in some form of work, harei ze mitchayev bin nafsho. He really, deserves the death penalty. Now, again, this is language that needs to be explained when it applies. But the concept is very, very clear. Avot Rab Natan tells us that you should know, if, let's say, for example, you walk into the temple and take some of the money that was designated for the temple, you're doing a terrible sin. It's not your money. But if, on the other hand, you come to the temple and you're a worker and you fix something that's in the temple and they pay you from that currency and you're doing a mitzvah. So it is work that gives value to existence, right? The idea of retirement, very problematic for Avot Rab Natan. Value the marketplace, fundamental text, fundamental teaching. And basically, for a Jew to live a life of holiness, a life where you feel that you are elevated and designated for something good, you read this parasha and you realize that this is a parasha that's talking about interactions with others, not to steal, not to be dishonest, not to deny falsely, not to go ahead and make a false oath. These are all marketplace activities. And it's telling us you do what's right in the marketplace. Welcome to your Kedusha. Now, if it is indeed fundamental to remember our value, we have to just be careful and not forget that when we state that we have value, it means everyone else as well. And we have to fulfill our responsibility to those that have less. And again, and that's why in this parsha we are told, in other words, when it comes time to the harvest, remember that there are sections that are designated for the poor, meaning you have value, others have the value as well. This is really the theme of a parsha, that if Aseret HaDibrot, if you think about it, when you think about the experience at Sinai, it's an experience for a nation that is really detached from the world. When we read about the Midrashim, or even the verses of Kabbalat Torah, that they were able to experience the supernatural, it was a nation that was inspired, but detached from the world. They were in the wilderness, they were at Har Sinai, and they were in a state that was beyond natural. This is a parasha that's telling us, okay, now welcome back to reality. How do I deal with the reality? There are fundamentals. The fundamental is to value self, and you value self when you understand that many years ago, something was taught to my great-great-great-grandparents. I mentioned earlier about the animal kingdom and the fact that at a very young age, an animal no longer has this responsibility towards the offspring. What's fascinating for me also is the fact that I don't know if there's anywhere in the animal kingdom that you have grandparents taking care of grandchildren, right? I wonder if there's anywhere, any lizards in the Amazon or any monkeys somewhere in Indonesia that they have, that scientists will tell me, you know what? They take care of their grandchildren. By us humans, it is so. And the reason, there's a concept, and the Torah tells us, Vigata lebincha uleben bincha, because we're about continuity, that the grandparent looks at the grandchild and says, you know what, you're my continuity. I'm here in this world for a specific reason. There are teachings that I value. I want these teachings and this lifestyle to live on because I believe it's important. And you are a carrier of it. And the grandchild will look at the grandparent and say, you know what, you link me to the past. You link me to the old country. You link me to to tradition. You are one generation closer to Sinai. You could tell me stories of great rabbinic figures, right? Or great personality or righteous people that I could learn from. There's a relationship. This is a relationship that's basically saying there's value. In other words, in a world where the young child's goal is to figure out how to use the latest piece of technology, or how to go ahead and figure out the latest video game. A grandparent is someone that exists to laugh at that they don't know how to do WhatsApp, or that they always post things in the wrong group. That's how youth in this generation look at grandparents, right? They don't know how to use it. You know, they're terrible, right? They don't know. Or, well, that comes from an attitude that we are progressing. We are progressing another generation away from the monkeys, and therefore we are progressing. So grandparents is simply a burden. What do they have to offer? On the other hand, the Kedoshim attitude, a life of an understanding that we are elevated and we are designated. If that's what life is about, Ish imo v'aviv tira, there should be some reverence. Reverence because they represent the past, they connect us to the past, and give us this significant value of existence. So that's what we have in Parashat Kedoshim. It's obviously a parsha that there are so many other details that could be focused on. But if you are looking for a general theme, and it's one that talks about the journey of life, I think really that here we have it. There are obviously teachings that guide us in balancing our responsibilities. You know, when you look at the verse that tells us, verse 16, not to talk lashon hara, and at the same time, not to stand by idle when your fellow's blood is being spilled. In other words, we have a responsibility not to talk negatively about others because we could destroy them by saying the wrong things about the other person. But at times we have a responsibility to say something. When someone calls me and they ask me about their desire to enter into a partnership with a specific person, and I have some negative information that I know that it will create a problem for the one entering into the partnership, and this could be a business partnership, it could be a shidduch, I have a challenge here, because on the one hand, I want to be careful not to speak lashon hara. On the other hand, I have this major issue that the Torah warns me, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. In other words, I can't stand by idle. I have to say something. So this is a parsha that really talks about that journey of life. When we do it with the proper commitment, we merit indeed the kedusha that is offered in this week's parsha. So a lot here, and hopefully you'll have the opportunity to look over this parsha on Shabbos. For now, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us again, and it should be a wonderful